I woke up this morning and I read the news on my phone, and apparently Donald Trump is trying to get I guess they call it the nuclear option, and the filibuster as a way to help get the government shutdown ended. That could prove to be what is known as a Faustian bargain. You might get what you want in the short term, but in the long term, it comes back. Uh, like my dad used to say, that could be like crossing a boomerang with a rattlesnake. It'll come back around to bite you. Um, does Donald Trump not stop and think? Next year, 2026, is an election year for the Congress. There is a possibility, remote as it might be, there's a possibility that the Democrats could retake the House and they could end up retaking the Senate. If that happens, you know that they're going to impeach him. You know they're going to do that. Even if they don't have enough votes in the Senate, they're going to do it. They are so angry at him right now. But you've got the Schumer shutdown, which is essentially what it is. Chuck Schumer could end this with a phone call. Um, I live in Virginia, and a lot of the people here, the Democrats, are all angry and bent out of shape at the shutdown. TSA workers, um, air traffic controllers, and whatnot. They're expected to work and they're not paid. And my wife is also a furloughed federal employee, so I totally understand the frustration. But both of our senators, both Democrats, um, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, voted for the shutdown. So these people are angry at Trump, but this isn't Trump's tar baby. This is the Democrats. They could end this if they want to. But Trump's idea of getting rid of the filibuster, when political winds change, these things come back to bite you. You could ask Chuck Schumer, ask um, Mitch McConnell, ask the late Harry Reid. What happens when they make a rule in the Senate that they insist on having, and then the other party becomes the majority? Then all of a sudden it's not so funny anymore. I remember when George W. Bush was president, he put forth a couple nominees to be on the high court, like, was it Harriet Myers, and Miguel Estrada, Janice Rogers Brown, and some others. He put them on to be on the Supreme Court, and the Democrats under Chuck Schumer or Harry Reid, the majority leader at the time, uh, didn't let it go up for a vote. Well, then all of a sudden, when um, Obama was president, he put up Merrick Garland to be on the Supreme Court, and Mitch McConnell refused to allow it to go to the floor for a hearing and a vote. Um, but that's a rule the Democrats wanted. So come on, Republicans, don't be like Democrats here. You know, deal with the shutdown the way it is, and um, let Chuck Schumer feel the heat. Chuck Schumer probably wants to end the shutdown. He probably does, and many of the Democrats do too. But he's basically saying that the um, the health insurance, free health insurance for illegal aliens, is more important than the well-being of federal employees and the American public. They won't come out and say it, but that's what they mean. That's what they're holding out for. So we're in a very weird situation with this. Um, will they get something done by Monday? I don't know. But even I believe he was the union president of the air traffic controllers, had requested that they go ahead and pass a clean CR just to get the government reopened. Um, some of I believe it was the CEO of United Airlines, also said the same thing. And he tried to be really nonpartisan about it. He's like, look, we need to get, we got the Thanksgiving travel. That week is the biggest travel week for the entire year. And it does possibly endanger public safety. You'll have air traffic controllers and other people who are, what you could argue is an essential government worker. They're expected to work and not be paid. And that's stressful enough as it is, but then they got to worry about, their own Thanksgiving dinner and feeding their own families. Um, you know, some people do have some money saved up to help get through you know, the furlough, and they'll get paid when they get back to work. But a lot of these TSA workers are not exactly making six figures, and it's going to be a financial hardship on them. But yeah, um, we sort of have a weird situation where the Republicans are happy to spend 2 trillion in deficits, or add 2 trillion to the deficit, and the Democrats want to make it 3 trillion. And in my view, we should have a balanced budget, and I do believe that is possible. It would be some short-term pain, but much long-term gain. Um, Regarding the Obamacare subsidies, that should be proof right there that Obamacare needs to be scrapped. It was a failure, and they subsidized it, and then they wonder why things get more expensive. You don't make things cheaper with subsidies. Seems like we've got this really weird dynamic going on in our country right now where there's just so much ignorance about economics out there. People just don't understand how things work. Um, New York City's getting ready to elect a communist to be their mayor. I don't see how he's going to lose, even if he gets 45% of the vote. The rest of the vote, you know, is going to be split between Cuomo and Curtis Lewa. So there's no way a Republican's going to win in New York City. I mean, that would be like, you know, the parting of the seas if Sliwa would win. I just don't think he's going to pull it off. I think it's going to be Cuomo. But nevertheless, Kathy Hochul was at a rally from Mamdani, and she endorsed him. But then when they came back to, well, are you going to pass that all on to the other taxpayers in New York State? Well, her tune changed a little bit. You know, basically, he wants to tax the super wealthy. Keep in mind, people in New York are taxed to death as it is, but he wants to tax the super wealthy. But by doing so, you're going to drive those people out of the city and even out of the state. Um, you know, I just I wonder what real estate values are right now in Westchester County, or out on Long Island, or maybe in the suburb of New Jersey, if they've gone up because people are planning on moving out and escaping before he comes into play. So some of the areas outside of New York City, they might have a real estate boom from people they still want to work in New York City, but they just don't want to be subject to those taxes. So that's the people in that region. They'll figure that out. But if Mamdani wins, people are saying, "Oh, this is going to be great because he'll run New York City into the ground, and then it'll show everybody how bad socialist Democrats are at managing things." I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is he he's going to run things into the ground, but he's going to go with the city council to Albany, and they're going to demand state money to help New York City get bailed out. And then Kathy Hochul, Chuck Schumer, Kristen Gillibrand, I'm sorry, and some of the other people in the New York congressional delegation, like Hakeem Jeffries and whatnot, they're going to go to Washington, D.C. with their hands out, and they're going to say, "Hey, we need a bailout." That's what's going to happen. When people are in pain, they will tend to find a way out of the pain, find somebody to blame, and maybe find a way to fix it. But what happens with this communist light form of government is that they never admit that it doesn't work. They just want to extrapolate it, replicate it elsewhere, and you're going to have all these Mamdani clones like running for mayor and city council all over the country. He's basically inspiring a whole generation of young communists who really don't know what communism is. They don't realize it fails. They just say, "Well, that wasn't real communism," or the right people weren't in charge. That's what they'll tell you. So it will be it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But as far as the shutdown, the media narrative is that it's the Republicans' fault because we have a Republican president, a Republican majority in the House, and a slight Republican majority in the Senate. But the reality of it is you need 60 votes. So right now, this is a Democrat shutdown, or I should say a Chuck Schumer shutdown. A lot of these Democrats probably are not wild about it, but Chuck Schumer does not fear any Republican. He's a he's a Democrat senator from New York State. No Republican is going to beat him ever. I don't think New York has had a Republican senator since Alphonse D'Amato, and that was probably back in the 90s. But he fears primary competition from his left. You could have Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, even Mamdani might decide, hey, I'm going to primary this guy. Or what if AOC says, I'm going to run against Chuck Schumer when he's up? I'm not sure when, is he up? I think he's up in 2028. I believe he's up in 2028. Well, AOC will be old enough to run for president by then. If that doesn't shiver your timbers, I don't know what does. But nevertheless, she might decide, I'm going to primary him. And if Mamdani gives her the endorsement, he's going to be gone. He's like an old dinosaur Democrat. The party has shifted very much to the left, even if the voters really haven't. The new breed of Democrats are very far left, and they're coming up, and they feel like they've been screwed over, like they don't have an opportunity. So it's a lot easier for the younger people to embrace socialism. I find this. My son is 27. He's not super politically active, but he's definitely not a leftist. He's center right to right. So is his wife. But you know, they people in his generation. I see it. Some of the people on his Facebook feed. They really believe all this socialism stuff, that it can work, and you know they'll hold up Norway as an example of a socialist country, which it's really not. They're very capitalist. They just have high taxes and a generous safety net, but they don't let everybody in the world just come there and partake in their largesse. They have a small, homogenous, stable, educated population. You can't take. I mean, their population is smaller than some of our cities, and most of all of our states. But when you mention Cuba or the Soviet Union or North Korea, they say, well, but that wasn't real socialism. That wasn't real communism. Well, it actually is. That's how it ends up. Communism and socialism sounds great in a dorm room after a few hits on the bong late at night, but how it works in the real world, like Mamdani, this guy could sell a box of rusty razor blades to a hemophiliac, but selling something to somebody, it's like, okay, well, how do you make it work? It's like having a nice shiny car in the showroom, but the engine doesn't run, the transmission skips gears, it's got leaky gaskets everywhere, but the paint job is like phenomenal, and it's nice and shiny, and it smells good, and the seats are nice, but it won't get you up the road. So anyway, we live in some very interesting times. It's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds, but here in Virginia, we're in the middle of a nasty gubernatorial race. The Democrats have opened the session of the legislature the week before the election so that it pulls Winsome Sears off the campaign trail. She's running to be lieutenant governor. Or she's running to be governor. I'm sorry. She's the current lieutenant governor. So she's constitutionally obligated to preside over the Senate. That takes her off the campaign trail in the last week. And to make things more interesting, Winsome Sears is a black woman who's a Marine Corps veteran, and she's an immigrant from Jamaica. She came to America as a young child. Her dad brought her here, and she became a citizenship, joined the Marine Corps and all that. Very, very successful woman. But what's funny is her opponent is a soccer mom looking white woman. She's like in her mid to late 40s, Abigail Spanberger. She's a leftist, used to be a CIA operative, she looks like the soccer mom down the street, but she really votes probably to the left of Nancy Pelosi, but she's coming across as this moderate. She was also a member of Congress, and she had a very left-wing voting record, but she's trying to appeal to this moderate stuff, but what she believes is right in line with the far left. But the NAACP, which I call it the National Association of Always Complaining People, They're supposed to look out for quote unquote colored people, which is a word you're not supposed to use, but that's the name of the organization. But so here they they came out and they said you had to vote for Kamala Harris because she's the black woman running against a white man. So now you have a gubernatorial race. The NAACP comes out and says, well, we have to vote for Spamberger. So they endorse the white woman over the black woman. Well, that tells you what they're really all about. As the late Rush Limbaugh once said, it was the NAALCP, the National Association for the Advancement of Liberal Colored People. I think he meant leftist colored people, but nonetheless, his words from beyond the grave are 100% spot on. Well, anyway, I'm sorry I almost dropped my phone there. I don't have a selfie stick. I should probably get one. I'm just sitting out here on my porch in this beautiful day. But it's, you know, it's scary enough. We don't even need Halloween. Just turn on the news and that'll scare you just as much. So if you have a SNAP card or whatever, you better go ahead and use it. I was at Walmart yesterday and I asked the loss prevention guy, and he said they're planning on being open. I have heard that some stores are closed on November 1st. Yeah, on November 1st, tomorrow. And they're only taking internet orders where you come and pick it up. But I don't think that's around here. Our store is staying open. But we're kind of out in the sticks. You know, we don't have a whole lot of that bad stuff happen out here. Knock on wood. We'll just have to see where this goes. But one more thing before I close out. I wanted to mention that there was in the state legislature, my favorite delegate, Nick Freitas, posted a video on his YouTube channel this morning. The state legislature, he rose to adjourn and have a moment for the late Charlie Kirk. And of course, the Republicans all stood. Most all the Democrats got up and walked out, or they remained seated, or they just weren't paying attention, just ignoring it. Which showed where, how many of them feel. But a Democrat delegate from Fairfax got up and said, we wish to adjourn in honor of Melissa Hortman. She was a Democrat legislator in Minnesota who was assassinated I guess it was back in the spring or the summer, was assassinated by that guy. I think it was she and her husband got killed. They had a moment of silence to honor her when they adjourned. And of course, the Republicans and the Democrats all got up together and, honored her death because she was a colleague, even though she was on the other side of the aisle. Not only did that show the difference across the aisle, but it showed the difference in Northern Virginia, Fairfax, and the rest of the Commonwealth. Kind of showed a division there too. I've always joked that Donald Trump should have built his wall at the Rappahannock River, because it seems like a lot of the area north of the Rappahannock River is not really Virginia anymore. Not the same as the central and southern part of the state. But I guess it's the same. You could say the same thing about New York, Illinois, and even Oregon and Washington to the same extent. But Northern Virginia, that's where the money is and that's where the people are. So I get it. I totally get it. They've got a lot of influence. If you look at Northern Virginia, we have 11 congressional districts, and I think 6 of them are in Northern Virginia. I think 5 of them are a small geographical area, whereas I live in the 5th congressional district, and it goes all the way down to the state line in North Carolina. It's huge, but that's where the people are and that's where the money are, and it is still part of Virginia, of course, geographically, but culturally there's a huge difference. I could go and carry a loaded firearm. I could carry openly and go to the farmer's market. I could go to a gas station or whatever. Nobody would say anything. If I did that in Northern Virginia, somebody would call the police on me in like a New York minute. It's just a different just a different vibe, you know. And I used to work up there. I drove up there every day from Richmond before I retired. Used to go up there, and it's just a different. You have to experience it to believe it. People drive differently, they act differently in stores, and the whole cultural it's just different. You'd have to know understand it, but say what you want about Charlie Kirk. I hear people keep saying he was a racist. I don't believe that. I never heard him say anything racist. There were some comments he had made that were sometimes taken out of context, but I just, you know, I just believe that he was able to bring people together and got people talking with each other. Because he said when people stop talking, that's when the violence happens. And whatever you think of him, he was correct about that. And I think a lot of other people are, he's inspired a lot of younger people to uh, carry on in his footsteps. And, you don't have to like the guy's politics, you don't have to like his religion or whatever, but he was very intelligent. He could have a knockdown, drag out argument with somebody without having to look at his phone or look at, notes or anything like that. He knew a lot of stuff out of his memory. And, he was probably on the spectrum somewhere a little bit, but, you know, I used to love watching his arguments with people, even when I disagreed with him. I do think that he did a very good job of presenting his side, and he didn't try and shout people down. He gave people the chance to speak and engage in civil dialogue. That's something that's missing in our society today. Not even just politically. There's so many people out there that they just want to shut you down and talk over you. And you go to one of these rallies and you try and ask people questions, and they've got noisemakers, they've got bullhorns, they've got people yelling at you, and then they're saying you're a fascist, you're a fascist. They don't even know what fascism is. They don't even know what a fascist does. One thing fascists do is try and shut down any opposition. They shut down any argument. They talk over you, they drown you out, they suppress dissent. So when people go around calling other people fascists when there's not any merit in it, it kind of rings hollow. But I've rambled on enough. Just, if you haven't voted, get out there and vote, you know? Um, I'm kind of reminded of a saying from Mark Twain. If voting really mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. But nevertheless, I still believe it's sort of your civic duty, I find that I often vote against the worst person instead of for the better person. But that's just the way it is today. You have to, rather than voting for somebody I believe is going to do the most good, I end up voting against the person who I believe is going to inflict the most damage. But that's where we are today. So I wish everybody a happy Halloween. And, if you go out trick or treating, watch out because people are driving and they're not paying attention. If you have little kids, stay with them when they go out because you don't know what kind of sickos there are out there. Happy Halloween and happy Friday.